Hello and welcome to the Guest EdTech Virtual Summit Dubai. We're pleased to introduce you to Charles Wood, Head of International Century Tech. We hope you enjoy the session, and over to you, Charles.
Many thanks, Sarah. And it's really great to be here presenting to you all today. So I'm just going to get my slides up, which you should hopefully be able to see now. So as introduced, I lead the international team at Century Tech. Century is a company based out of London in the United Kingdom. We have huge presence across all the Gulf states in the Middle East. And so it's a great pleasure to be here, guest for the third time running, talking about how AI has supported the global disruption in education that we've all witnessed and been a part of over the past 9 months. So we're going to have a little look at what AI is, how it's currently being applied in certain branches of education, and what experience we've had as a leading company in AI of how that's impacted schools, educators, teachers, parents, and of course the biggest stakeholders, the learners. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of that today, but I think it's best to start with a bit of history about how we ended up with this type of technology in the classroom today. And that, for us as a journey, started about 8 years ago now, when our founder and CEO, Priya Lakhani, was sitting on Vince Cable's Business Skills Advisory Board in the UK during the coalition government. And she found, really interestingly, that we had a number, actually up to 1.8 million students in the UK underperforming in basic maths and literacy. So resitting those mathematics and English examinations in order to reach a certain threshold to move on to tertiary education or indeed employment in some cases. And actually, when we looked at what was going on in classrooms across the UK, we found that teachers and classrooms were still geared and delivering towards the one-size-fits-all model. So as I suppose what I'm doing now, I'm delivering a one-size-fits-all presentation to you all and not catering to your different paces of learning, your different understanding, your different levels. I'm just delivering a one-size-fits-all talk to you. And that's really astonishing because we know that personalization can help students. We know that those students who are able to afford tutors to personalize education make better progress. And so the types of technology that were currently being used weren't going as far as that personalization element that's so important. But also, crucially, we found that when looking at teachers and the work that they were doing, often they were spending up to 60% of their time on admin. So whether that's marking work, whether that's entering data into spreadsheets, sort of tied to the shackles of Ofsted, teachers weren't spending enough time face-to-face and in front of students and doing what they do best, which is teaching. And that's no fault at all of sort of teachers, but that is just the system that we have. And so we looked and thought, well, how can technology assist and aid with that? Because technology has disrupted industries all around the world historically. And so we wanted to know what was going on in the classrooms, what was being deployed and invested in. And we came across this, the learning management system, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And the learning management system was supposed to be the sort of great digitization of processes that we do. But of course, digitization is so much more than simply putting something into a digital format. It also encompasses elements of innovation and changing processes to find efficiencies and to be more effective. And ultimately, we think that the learning management system has failed in that. The learning management system has simply replicated processes, manual processes that we've always done, like marking homework, like setting work, but rather than doing it in a paper-based format, we're now doing it in a digital format. It's still taking the same amount of time. We might be saving paper, which is fantastic for the environment, but it's ultimately exactly the same process. And we really felt that we can do better than that. We can utilize advanced technology and technologies like artificial intelligence to disrupt and find efficiencies within these processes. And really, when we're thinking about that, this is what is driving certainly us as a company. We believe that each and every child deserves a world-class education tailored and personalized to their individual needs. And we think we can achieve that through these 4 elements, these 4 pillars, if you like. That is, first of all, of course, looking at the quality of content that we're putting in front of students and constantly refining that to make sure that that content is having an impact on learning outcomes. Secondly, that we are empowering teachers, not replacing elements of teaching, but empowering teachers with data that can help them with smarter and more effective and efficient interventions. How are we doing that? Well, we're harnessing big data. We collect an awful lot of data, and we use that to try to make recommendations and certain nudges based on statistically significant patterns and correlations. And finally, possibly the most important thing, especially as a social impact company, we want to ensure that we try to level the playing field and address the disadvantage gap that exists. And there's no beating around the bush. AI has the potential to level the playing field, but it also has the potential to create even bigger divides, because if you make AI and that type of technology available for just those who can afford it, then you end up having biases within your AI, and you end up actually creating a larger gap in terms of equity between students who can access it and students who can't access it. So all of that's really important when thinking about AI. And just as a sort of very reductive and brief overview of what AI is, I thought this diagram depicts it quite well. AI is the replication of certain human functions in an autonomous way. And if we think about the way in which a human learns, we learn from experience, and we learn from the day that we're born, whether that's from trying to walk, and we learn from falling down and trying to balance, whether that's up to sort of high school education, where we learn from our mistakes, or we learn from what our teachers and peers tell us. So that's how humans learn. We pick up information and we use that to progress and understand information, and better utilize information. Machines, computers, and systems often they work in slightly different ways. They follow instructions. So developers, engineers will hard code a machine and tell it what to do under certain scenarios. It's really important to distinguish that against what an AI machine is, because whilst a normal machine or device will learn from, or sorry, not learn at all, it will take instructions and follow those instructions. An AI machine will learn from some sort of experience, but in this case, we call that experience data. So artificial intelligence machines collect data, and they're constantly using that data to try and find patterns and correlations in order to, in this case, improve learning outcomes or improve efficiencies. And so it can use that data to learn and then adjust and adapt accordingly. So it's really important to understand that distinction, and I know that lots of companies are talking about adaptive technology and machine learning and AI. It's really important to get underneath the hood of that and actually ask, what are you using? What do you mean when you say artificial intelligence? Because it's really important that we're clear about that. Now, AI has been used in industries for many years. It's not actually a particularly new concept, although it is fairly new, I think, in the realm of education. Certainly in the application of educational technologies, but your everyday media sources like Spotify, Netflix, YouTube use artificial intelligence to try and make nudge recommendations to you, often with that maybe slightly cynical side of trying to get you to purchase things or try to increase your engagement on their platform. So your Netflix account will make recommendations to you based on certain shows that you've watched. We've seen a lot of advances in AI in security and, of course, the medical world, where we know that companies have done fascinating research on how to identify certain diseases through feeding the machine with different brain scans or other scans of lungs and things, depending on what they're trying to identify. So there's lots of work in the world, in the medical world, and of course there is work in the food and drink industry as well. I know that we have intelligent brewing companies now that actually look at the different ingredients put into the mix and try to regulate and tweak it according to data that they're collecting. So it's not a new concept, and it is being used, and I guarantee that the majority of you listening to this today will interact with AI on some level. How can we then think about AI in education? Because actually there are some companies who failed spectacularly at trying to develop AI in education, and that's really down to the design of what are you utilizing AI for. And actually there are different types of AI that can be utilized in education, whether you're thinking about chatbots, intelligent chatbots that use natural language processing to engage and interact based on your input. But what we're looking at here today are recommendation engines. So engines that are using vast quantities of data, live data, to then give students certain journeys or pathways based on that. Pathways that aren't hard-coded by humans, but that are looking at how the student is learning. And that's really important. So we're not just making recommendations to students based on their preferences, because of course that wouldn't work in education. If you like studying fractions, then we're going to end up keep giving you more fraction work. That's not going to help you pass your algebra exam or your geometry exam. So preferences is a part of it, but actually a really important part is looking at the learning behaviors, and that's often informed by the research and the work that lots of neuroscientists have done around how the brain works. So we look at things like the feedback loop, like the interleaved and spaced learning effect. We've looked at some of Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset. And of course, we've also looked at active memory recall. When do things move from short-term working memory in the prefrontal cortex into your long-term memory? Of course, that's incredibly important in education. And actually, we can now track that attainment and progression and try to make recommendations based on it. So that's how we've positioned ourselves by using advanced technology and also using key theories of neuroscience. And all of that leads to us recommending a certain journey to students based on their strengths, their weaknesses, their skill gaps, their confidence levels, their pace of learning, their preferences, and their memory function. And below you can see a sort of representation of what our recommended pathway looks like. In this case, we're looking at little nano lessons in mathematics, English, science, and the pathway is just nudging students along, trying to identify where those gaps in knowledge are and then plugging them. So are you struggling with velocity in physics because of your understanding of equations in mathematics? Well, an AI machine can pick up on that immediately and then make a recommendation to plug that gap. And so we're closing that feedback loop down and trying to find efficiencies and be more effective in giving students opportunities to overcome and remove those learning roadblocks that they often come across. And of course, we'll come on to it in a minute. This has become even more important where we're looking at distance learning environments or we're looking at a disrupted system where students aren't necessarily in the classroom and aren't necessarily having those face-to-face interactions as much. Just to give you an idea of the sort of quantity of data that you need in order to do something like this, this is a visualization of the summary of activities that we can collect behind the scenes. So what are students looking at? What type of content are they consuming? How long are they spending on it? Where are they pausing? What types of questions are they answering? Which ones are they getting wrong? Which misconceptions are they displaying? Which skill gaps exist? And all of that can be used to try and understand how the student is accessing material and then how that leads to the learning outcome. And actually, if we break that down slightly further, we can even look at a tiny section of this learning activity over the course of, I think it's 9 minutes here. We're looking at a student. What have they looked at? Where have they paused? How weighted are those questions? Or what skills are being applied when answering those questions? So the machine can obviously pick up on all of this and crunch data like this in nanoseconds and then use it to make a recommendation. So in a sense, it's almost sort of supercharging what teachers do anyway in things like question level analysis and observing students and then trying to make live interventions. But we can obviously do that on a mass scale and in a much more effective and efficient way. We then crucially feed that data back to teachers, senior leaders, and even ministries. We work with a number of ministries around the world. And that's really important because we want teachers to be empowered with the rich data that we're collecting. We want teachers to understand how they can use that data to effectively inform interventions, to inform summative activities that they might be running, or even to inform station rotation settings that they've set up within their classroom. And I think the UAE is our second largest market outside of the United Kingdom. And we see some of the most advanced uses of our technology within schools across the region, across both Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Sharjah, where schools have really embraced this technology to make teachers more agile and to give teachers more time focusing on those face-to-face interactions, whether on Zoom or in person. This is a really interesting slide, and it's something that came out of our work with University College London, when we did a large trial with them with 20,000 students in, I think, the year 2017. And obviously these radar diagrams allow us to show you the type of learning behaviors that we saw students displaying on our system. And so if we start on the left-hand side, we're looking at pupil premium students versus non-pupil premium students. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the UK system, in the UK, we have pupil premium students who are eligible for free school meals. It's a bit of a hot topic at the moment, with Marcus Rashford campaigning again with the sort of against the government to get those reinstated over Christmas and the summer term. And pupil premium students are from low-income families or disadvantaged backgrounds, and so they're eligible for these subsidies at school. And what we wanted to try and ascertain is, were those students able to learn at the same rate and achieve at the same rate on Sentry as non-pupil premium students? And we found exactly that. We found there were some slight discrepancies in terms of the way in which they were studying. But if you look at the top bullet on that radar diagram, we found that they both reached very similar levels of understanding. It's hard to see, but I think there was a 0.5 percentage difference in terms of understanding, but they both reached very similar levels, which was great to see. The middle one is even more fascinating. We had enough of a sample size from dyslexic students and ASD students that we were able to analyze how they were interacting on the system compared to non-special educational needs students. And so you can see here that actually we found our dyslexic students, they're not labeled, but our dyslexic students were spending a lot longer consuming certain types of material than our ASD or non-sense students. And our ASD students, on the left-hand side, you can see they were actually attempting questions much more frequently. They were going over questions again and again in order to increase their score. So this was really fascinating to see. But again, of course, the most important point was that they were all reaching similar levels of understanding, and that wasn't being disrupted by the fact that they had a special educational need. And you can see that the points are very similar to each other in terms of that understanding point. Of course, finally, you won't be surprised that the girls and boys displayed very similar patterns of behavior. I think girls maybe spent a little bit longer studying on certain bits of material, but again, they reached very similar levels of understanding when analyzing that data set. So how does this impact and what happened when coronavirus hit? Well, we were very lucky. We have a very supportive board who, when coronavirus started spreading within China through Hong Kong, our board said, you as a company are in a position to support learners around the world. Let's do that. And so we were very lucky to have the backing of our board to offer our services for free to schools around the world. And in 6 months, we had just over 4,000 school inquiries from schools around the world requesting our support. And we were so privileged to be able to do that, because I think a big part of what I'd like to talk about today is how AI can help to continue with learning, can help the education system in times of disruption, as well as normal times. And we came up with an incredibly robust system. We could get schools up and running on our system with under 3 hours. We had an incredibly agile training program that was delivered by our customer support team all hours of the day. And one school in China was particularly interesting. I think it was one of the Nord Anglia schools. We're answering sort of 30,000 questions in less than a week. So really supporting learners. And we found that teachers especially relied heavily on Sentry as a sort of backbone to provide and continue education to some degree during this disruption. So really, really great to be able to support that. And we've got lots of media coverage that I'm happy to share with you after to learn about how different schools went about deploying this system. These are the sort of statistics we have now. We're having about 3 million questions answered every week. So we've seen huge increases in our usage, of course. We found that through, a study with UCL, on average, students increase their understanding of topics as a result of our memory feature by 30% across maths, English, and science, which is fantastic. Some schools, have actually linked the use of Sentry and the correlation of the use of Sentry to increase in examination results. And I believe we have a school in the UAE, Uptown International, part of the Talim group, who linked it to an increase in their progress scores within GL. And of course, teachers have found that it's helping reduce their workload. They're saving time on administrative tasks, and they're able to use that to spend more time in front of their students. This is just an example of some of the schools we work with. We're really proud of our schools. As you can see there, we have high performance learning schools like Doha College, as well as some of the leading schools in the UAE like Jess and the Nord Anglia Group. And that goes to the UK as well. Eton College are one of our best using schools, especially in English, which is really interesting. And we also have group contracts with groups like Cognito. We have 42 of their schools across Europe and the UK. And at the bottom there, you can see some of the awards and recognitions that we have. And actually, we were very proud to have won the GESS Award for Best Product of 2020 it was earlier this year. It seems like a lifetime ago. But yes, that's some of the schools we work with. We'd be happy for you to be put in touch with any of them if you'd like to hear about their experience of working with us. Our website is fantastic, and if you go to the news and blog section, there has been some brilliant case studies and resources that have been driven actually by schools. Some schools you'll recognize there from the UAE, but there are some as far afield as Panama and Nigeria and Barcelona. So please do take a look and have a read, and hopefully you find those informative. This is our global presence as of, I think, a week ago. Yes, in October, so it was a week ago, a little bit out of date, but we're in around 42 countries now. And as you can see, we've started to develop localized curriculum and language versions of the system. So we actually have an Arabic version of the platform. We're really excited with a partnership that we have in the Middle East for the development of Arabic courses, both for Arabic speakers and non-Arabic speakers. So that's a really exciting update. We have a South African curriculum version in development, an Australian curriculum version live, and a Pakistani curriculum version in partnership with the City School Group. We work with about 130 of their schools in Pakistan. So really exciting. And of course, the dream is to eventually move into other curriculums like the Common Core and the CBSE curriculum. In terms of other projects, we work with schools, and that's great, but we also work with colleges, we work with governments, and a few interesting things that we're working on at the moment. We actually won an award and a grant from Nesta and the Department for Education, so a national contract in the UK, to upskill adults of a certain demographic and a certain salary threshold who are at risk of losing their jobs as a result of automation. And so we are working to upskill adults around the UK, and that's a really exciting project that we hope can be scaled and also localized to other parts of the world. A really important part of our work is also as one of the founding members of the Institute for Ethical Use of AI in Education, which was ratified by the House of Lords and is currently running a summit on the research that it has collected over the past 18 months. That's really important to have that open discussion about privacy, data, and the ethics around what the use of AI in education means. We also are a partner of Pearson, and we are their technology provider. So we power some of their tools, including MathFlex. We provide an API to our adaptive engine, and that will power some of their content, which is really exciting when looking at scale and our reach across the world. So that's it for today. I hope that's given you a bit of insight into the work that we're doing, the application of AI in terms of recommendation engines. And I would be more than happy to talk to you further and give you a demonstration of our technology with your teams. If that's something of interest, you can reach me on my email address, which is charles@sentry.tech, or you can go on our website at www.century.tech to learn more about the work that we're doing around the world. I hope you enjoy the show, and thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you, Charles. That was so great, really interesting, and lots of great stats and information for people in there. If you have any questions about anything you've heard in this talk, you can connect with Charles through the networking system on the virtual event platform and ask him any questions. And this is one of many on-demand videos that you can watch at any time during the summit, as well as a full program of live keynote and panel sessions across both days. Don't forget to connect with us on Twitter for the latest show updates. Follow us at Guess Education and use the hashtag GuessEdTech. We hope you enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.